Balloons, bazookas, boobies, bosoms, boulders, cans, hooters, knockers, melons, honkers, jugs, rack, tatas, tits, torpedoes, guns, bust, doorknobs, coconuts, and our favorite one, the girls. Welcome to the All About Breastfeeding show, where your host, Lori, highlights mothers just like yourself and goes beyond the surface questions and digs deep so they share not only their joys and happiness in their daily breastfeeding life, but also their pain and struggles and how they worked through them.
Episode number 199. Welcome to All About Breastfeeding, the place where the girls hang out. I am your host, Lori Isenstadt, IBCLC, and I help moms with breastfeeding. If you would like to learn more about the work that I do and the services that I provide, all you need to do is go to www.allaboutbreastfeeding.biz. We will continue today with our FAQ series, Birth Matters. In this series, you're learning that birth can have a direct impact on your breastfeeding experience, whether it is where you birth, how you birth, when you birth, and with whom you birth. Birth matters. All of this can have a direct impact on your breastfeeding experience. We've talked about postpartum hemorrhage and its effect on breastfeeding. We've talked about premature babies and late preterm babies and its effect on breastfeeding. And today, we will talk about breastfeeding after a traumatic birth. If you listen to this week's interview, episode number 198, it was part 1 with Christine Shepard. She also talked about her birth trauma and detailed how she felt it made breastfeeding more challenging. This totally took Christine by surprise, as she was a birth educator and a breastfeeding counselor, and she had counseled hundreds of moms on the early days of breastfeeding. She never anticipated having any problems with breastfeeding, and she was really thrown off when this happened to her. Today, we're going to hear about another couple's story of birth trauma and how it affected their early days of breastfeeding. A birth trauma is defined as being traumatic if the woman was or believed she or her baby was in danger. She perhaps felt helpless, out of control, or alone at any point during her labor or birth. Suffering from birth trauma is not something you have on your list of what to expect when planning your pregnancy and awaiting the birth of your baby. Parents typically have beautiful and loving pictures in their head on what postpartum life will look like and how they will feel. Sure, we expect to be tired and wonder if we will have a colicky baby, like perhaps your best friend did, and that scared you. There are feelings of worry and concern about having one of those babies you've heard about that never sleep. You may have expected some learning curve related to breastfeeding, but for the most part, your plan was to be at home relaxing with your baby, with your family, and enjoying new motherhood. For some moms, it just does not turn out that way. They have suffered through some degree of birth trauma, and it's making breastfeeding really difficult for them. Moms might connect with this fact right away, or it may never occur to them that their birth trauma is having an impact on their ability to breastfeed. In my private practice, I work with this issue all the time because unfortunately, a lot of people have some birth trauma. I've shared some stories of anonymous parents' experiences on this show before. There was one family that I worked with about 8 years ago that I have just been reminded about that really fits this topic so well. The dad's name was Jason and the mom's name was Erica. Jason was about 6'5", and Erica was about 5'4" or so. Their big difference in height has always stood out to me whenever I think of this couple. I think mostly because I still have very clear memories of Jason holding his little, so fragile-looking newborn baby girl in one arm. Alexis weighed about 4 pounds 12 ounces, and she was 9 days old when they first came to see me. I remember when Jason picked his newborn daughter up out of the car seat. He held her in the crook of one arm, and I remember thinking how sweet it was. As a mother of 2 daughters, it made me think, if only we could always keep our babies so close and so safe. Well, their plans of a full-term vaginal birth with healthy mom and baby took a dark turn when her bag of water burst at 35 weeks. It was a weekend, they were both at home, and they were given instructions to go to the hospital right away. Their chosen hospital was about 15 minutes away. They were greeted by staff who didn't know them and did not address them politely as they separated mom and dad so he could be filling out paperwork in another area of the hospital and she went on to the labor area. Erica tells me that she remembers feeling very faint and nauseous as her anxiety rose when Jason left her side. She thought her doctor was going to meet her there, but this was not the case, as her doctor did not show up for several more hours. And during that time, she was told she had a fever. She was hooked up to monitors. She could not be mobile for several hours, and now some pretty heavy-duty contractions set in, almost out of the blue. She wound up having a forceps delivery, which of course is very different than the vaginal delivery she planned. Her baby was not placed in her arms like she expected, and that she had dreams of after giving birth, that her baby would be placed in her arms on her chest, and that her and her husband would be gazing at the baby. And this scenario was very, very different, because what happened is the staff, they took her baby and they were working quickly to get her baby breathing. Her daughter, whom she barely got a look at, was quickly taken out of the room, and Jason had to make a quick decision, whether to stay with his wife or go with their baby. He followed the baby, which Erica to this day says was the right decision, but it left her feeling alone and vulnerable and scared. She tells me that she cried uncontrollably during her episiotomy repair, all while she worried about her baby's safety. She said to me, "I didn't know if she was alive or if she was dead, and I didn't believe the doctor when he kept telling me that she'd be fine. My birth was supposed to be fine, and it wasn't. Why would I believe that my baby was fine without proof? I expected my husband to come back and at least tell me she was fine. But after what seemed like forever, I still had not seen my husband yet." In the end, her baby was fine. She was being taken good care of, excellent care of in the nursery, and her husband, who she still did not blame at all, but he just lost track of time, and it wasn't until he was told that his wife was in her recovery room that he left the baby for the first time and went to his wife. Well, after a 5-day stay in the NICU, baby Alexis was finally discharged. In those first 5 days, though, there was a lot of mom and baby separation. No one got her pumping until the 3rd day, right before she was discharged. Being new to all this, she just didn't know to ask for a pump. And on the 5th day, the day of the baby's discharged, she was first encouraged to breastfeed her baby. Yeah, she said it didn't go so well, as she was so nervous, and one of the staff told her that she should pump first to perk up her nipples. And this left Erica feeling like she didn't have good nipples for breastfeeding. She had not yet held her baby for too long of a time, and she was feeling scared, and she was just shaky herself, not really having fully processed her birth experience yet. During our consult, I just could not get Erica to do much more than hold her baby, who she placed on top of her breastfeeding pillow, on her lap. She only wanted the baby to remain in the tightly swaddled blanket she put her in after I weighed her baby. Erica kept saying when they take her out of the swaddle, she cries, and she couldn't bear to hear her baby cry. Jason gently tried to prompt her to try and relax and let me work with her with breastfeeding. This meant, she said, that she would need to lift her shirt and unlatch her bra. And she literally shook each time it was suggested, once by me and once by Jason. Her eyes welled up, and her overall behavior was a pretty strong signal to me to be respectful and just let her be there and hold her baby on her lap. I evaluated the situation as best as I could, took a history as best as I could, and I determined that since there was nothing else in her previous history that would cause her to be so fragile herself, I suspected major birth trauma was playing a huge part in her fear to even try and breastfeed her baby. While still quite anxious, she at least felt comfortable and confident about bottle feeding Alexis. Jason told me that they were both quiet and calm people, and they had almost finished their childbirth classes and were really so much looking forward to new parenthood. The thought never occurred to either of them that they would ever go through something like this. In my opinion, neither Erica or Jason realized that they had suffered through a major birth trauma. They were told by family and friends, "This is what happens sometimes, and thank goodness you have a healthy baby." Now, how many of you have been told this? How does it make you feel? Better? Usually not. You return a smile and typically say, "You're right," and that's that. When I asked Erica if she discussed her feelings at her pediatric visit, she said no one asked, and she did not bring it up because she didn't want to cry. They had 2 pediatric visits since coming home from the hospital, and they were just so anxious each time to learn if their baby was fine, to get a healthy report. They just couldn't think of much else. They both seemed to have adopted the quote-unquote, "thank goodness you have a healthy baby" story. And this is the same story they told themselves, but clearly their actions said something gravely different. I knew that my role at this particular time was to let go of my agenda. Personally, I really wanted her to leave this consult breastfeeding her baby. I really wanted her to try and try again. I felt that if we could just get her baby to latch on in breastfeeding, well, I just felt that that alone would be healing and be motivating for her. I know you might be saying to yourself, "But she came to you for help with breastfeeding. Why didn't you just keep working with her?" However, she was clearly not ready for that, and I had to let go of my agenda, of my ego, and respect Erica. As an IBCLC who has been doing this work a long time, but is not a certified therapist, I could not and would not diagnose here. However, she sure seemed to be acting depressed and suffering from major birth trauma. There was no given history of anxiety or depression, and she described an otherwise happy and healthy pregnancy with no other health issues, not taking any medication other than prenatal vitamins and some other supplements. As I discussed this possibility of birth trauma with both of them, they both said, though the thought just never occurred to them, and they never thought that this was any part of their breastfeeding problem. I learned that they thought the breastfeeding problem stemmed from their baby's inability to be quiet whenever they unswaddled her, or to change her diaper, to even think about breastfeeding, to wash with a cloth, to do anything. It seems whenever they unswaddled their baby, she cried. And any time they cried, they just wanted to wrap her back up and keep her happy and peaceful. And who could blame them? And this is also how she bottle fed, all swaddled up most of the time. How could Erica possibly bring a crying baby to her breast? They had a lot going on. Her premature birth, the shock of going into labor much earlier than they were mentally prepared for, laboring for quite a while without their trusted doctor, the heightened fear that perhaps something happened to her baby when they were separated, Jason's guilt about choosing to go with his baby, particularly felt even more guilty when he learned about Erica crying for him and their baby during the episiotomy repair. He said he felt so bad about that. And on top of that, not getting help with breastfeeding during her whole hospital stay until the last day created fear about her trying once she got home. I'm sad to say that I lost track of Erica after that visit. This, unfortunately, is a reality in my job. It sometimes happens. Other times in these situations, parents start talking to each other or a friend or a family member, and the door is open to discuss birth trauma. And very soon, they are ready to work on breastfeeding. I get to follow through, to work with the mom on breastfeeding, and she comes through the other side. A happy breastfeeding mom who recognizes she suffered a severe trauma and is working on that with another specialist. Other times, things get worse before they get better. In this case, Erica did not respond to phone calls or emails. I could only hope that she followed up with the referrals I gave her. After sending a report to her physicians and after several weeks, I closed her case. I will never know what happened. However, I'm sure this otherwise young and healthy and happy pregnant mom had suffered a true severe birth trauma, and this was a direct impact on her ability to breastfeed. I've worked with many other moms who suffered somewhat similar and some different birth trauma. If they're willing to work at it, seek professional psychological help in addition to lactation support and good family support, enough moms I work with do go on to happily breastfeeding their baby. However, there are enough moms for whom the healing and recovery does not happen, at least in a timeline that works for breastfeeding this new baby. They suffer flashbacks from their birth. Rather than be incredibly attached and not wanting their baby to even cry a little bit, some moms are the opposite. They're quite detached from their baby as a way of dealing with their birth trauma. There are moms for whom the first try of breastfeeding does not go well, and their fear of something else not going well or having no control over it is just too much for them, and they have no emotional reserves left to try. Birth trauma is not limited to, but it can include pain related to labor and birth, an unscheduled emergency cesarean birth, feelings during your birth of loss of control, dissatisfaction with care and support, an extended separation from your baby. Birth trauma can also happen when you're giving birth in a war zone or during a natural disaster. As I'm reviewing my notes for this show, we are in the midst of Hurricane Harvey in August of 2017, which is devastating parts of Texas right now. And I'm hearing beautiful and such heartfelt stories of regular citizens, along with firemen and paramedics, who are helping bringing laboring women to safe places to give birth. I just saw a video where they were making a human chain, carrying a woman from the second floor of her house or apartment and carrying her all the way to the truck that would take her safely to a hospital. It just gave me a lump in my throat. The repercussions for these moms who suffer birth trauma during natural disasters, well, it could go either way for these moms. Are they feeling so incredibly blessed that they made it to a safe place to birth their baby, and their baby went to the breast shortly after birth, as it was like they were just born to breastfeed and it came real easy? Or is this mom worried to death about other family and loved ones they left behind on the roofs of homes in their neighborhood, hoping to be rescued? Does bringing their baby to their breast give them comfort and help calm them down? Or are they experiencing high anxiety and not getting any sleep whatsoever? Or are they medicated to calm them down? All of these situations have the potential to really affect their breastfeeding. For Erica, she needs help. Her husband, Jason, while seeming to be okay, he also suffered from the effects of birth trauma. His response might be different, but he was surely affected by the whole experience. He should take the opportunity to talk about his experience with a professional also, and I did recommend that to him. In my experience, it is the lack of not making the connection between the birth trauma and breastfeeding issues that causes moms to get off to a very difficult start. So, what can we do for moms in these type of situations? What can you or your family do to be helpful? What can your IBCLC do? Well, everyone who knows me knows that I'm a huge supporter of education and prevention. Hearing this information on this show is a great beginning because it raises your awareness and it is something that you can share with your partner, and it just opens up the conversation. Recognizing that you have suffered from a birth trauma increases the likelihood that you will work through this difficult time. Progress may be slow, however, determination and motivation and good support will go a long way in helping you breastfeed your baby. You will be motivated yourself or encouraged by your partner to not invalidate your feelings. Of course, you're happy that you have a healthy and alive baby. However, that fact just does not invalidate the emotional roller coaster you're finding yourself on. You do need to talk about it, and you do need to seek professional help. Well, as far as prevention and education goes, I encourage you, meet with an IBCLC. You can talk openly about your experience. Be willing to set short-term goals and simple goals. I so wished I could have worked with Erica and just gotten her to the starting point of just having her spend time skin to skin with her baby, connecting this way. That would have made me happy. You can also understand that while I surely hope that you receive the help and support you need for breastfeeding purposes, there is another reason to seek professional mental health help. Studies have shown that the effects of unresolved birth trauma can lead to attachment and parenting difficulties. It is so important to recognize if you have had a birth trauma for all of these reasons. I'm happy to report that with a greater awareness of this health issue, many moms we work with are able to work through their difficulties and create a very happy and fulfilling breastfeeding relationship with their baby. When you're able to connect the dots and get the right help, it can work out really nicely for you. For more detailed information on this subject and learning about PTSD associated with birth trauma, post-traumatic stress disorder, you can also go back and listen to episode number 147, where I interviewed the wonderful, amazing Kathleen Kendall Tackett, a fellow IBCLC who, through her own personal experience of birth trauma, that led her on a path to do some research and study the connection between birth trauma and PTSD. In the show notes for 147, there's a list of actions that you can take to help you deal with your emotions and work through your trauma. You can also check out the show notes for this episode, number 199, and you will find a nice list of helpful resources also. I hope you learned a lot from the show today. I will leave you today with the following thought. Life is tough, my darling, but so are you. Stephanie Bennett Henry. Until the next show, everyone, bye-bye.